in the metacognitive awareness regarding child mental health. And thank you. And I would like to have it as a full. Once again, welcome. It's quite late, but before or prior to dinner, I'm glad that we are together and you would like to listen to me. That's very nice. And ICP 2022, I would like to thank to the organization committee as well as Mr. Kemal, Mr. Mujahid. And just following the pandemic, we're now face to face with an qualitative and rich content as the child psychiatrists. We are participating as a large group, and this is very important with the foreign guests, although we are with them on with online, and it's great, and it's really great to have their contributions as well. So I'm very pleased to be with you here, and once again I would like to reiterate this, and the academicians, member of the faculties, I would like to extend my thanks to them as well. And with Mr. Brock, we are always together. It seems as if we are changing our places. Either you are here or I'm there. So within a very sincere and warm atmosphere, it's really good to be here. And when I was given the chance to talk at the Congress, I like this title because pandemic was a really challenging process and a period, and now we are in a period to comply with the recent and existing situation, and there is always a continuous change in the daytime. And Professor Kucher, in the opening speech, he touched on very important details, and he talked about good and bad stress, and he talked about how we would adapt ourselves in order to increase our resilience. We have to cope with stress, but on the other hand, when it is very severe, it's possible that we cannot cope with it. From the perspective of the children and adolescents, I will be talking about the mental diseases of the children, and what is so actually what is metacognition? Metacognition is already being touched on in adult psychiatry, but in the terminology for children and adults, the metacognition is within the field of education, and the educators, especially in the first and second steps, or in the elementary and secondary school, they deal with this term. And in this introduction to the child and adolescent psychiatry, this is a new term for the last decade, and it's an important title. So we always have this MASCO Congress. There are ones from Marlborough University, and last year we had the 20th year Congress, and this is the medical students Congress, and as of last year, it started to be an international one. This was a title which was brought by the students related to metacognition through the mental health of the children, whether we could do such and research. And then we concentrated on that, and in the new resources, we could find it. And of course, the events and the functions are to be aware, to be aware of the events and processes within the mindset of the person, and how that person learns, how she keeps in mind, and while he learns, what does it go through the brain, and what is the flow. This is a kind of awareness about this process. And related to this subject, Flaubert is the most well-known researcher who brought this on the agenda in 1985. It is consists of certain steps in the introduction speech related to the steps of the mental health literacy. It is completely related to this. First, you try to understand it, you analyze it, and then you control it, and then regulate it, and afterwards you use it for the feedback. If I to give an example briefly, For example, if a mathematics lesson subject is being given, what are the components of this subject, and this subject, how it can be processed so that we can keep in mind in a better way. Some learn by hearing, some learn by seeing, and it's on the hands, and sometimes people learn by experiencing it, and then there is a need for a feedback, how we learn better, how we learned, how we could keep it in mind. And first, the applications within the field of education likewise, and whether this can be used in psychiatry, and when children start thinking about their own thoughts. Anyone who has an idea about this? When children start being aware of their own thoughts. So what is the age range, just roughly? So I just heard somebody saying something here. Yes, right. 5, 6. It is said to be 3 or 5, but 5, 6 is much logical. And if the so prior to psychiatry, this subject was in the field of education. And in the recent times, it is closely related with the mental theory. What do I think? What other things? Whether the other things, what I think, if I do something or think something like this, whether my parents would think about me. So it is not anymore the state of the elementary school. There is a rapidly developing mental state or memory, and I think that this will have the place in the upcoming future. So this is very similar to the previous slide. So for 5 years, 5 years, so it is the time of the development of the mind theory. But watching and monitoring and controlling comes along with the elementary school time. So when it is the high school with the intangible thing, to consider the things in a philosophical way, to be curious about different types of thoughts. And when we review about how we think, it is also important to know about the other thoughts. So there is also an important issue related to the development of the mind. And in order to do this, of course, just prior to the school or as of the school, there should be the practices. And let me give you a simple example. I liked it very much and I want to share it with you. For example, there is something called understanding error. When you look into something that you know very well, or when what you are interested in, you may not be aware of the gaps there, or if you are preparing for a subject you know very well, if you say that I know it very well, there might be certainly an error. So in educational science, this is very much focused. So accordingly, different types of educations are provided, giving education in separation or division. So as you would know, if there is a question that you do not know during the exam, you should skip it and come back to it afterwards. And there are different ways of the mind dealing with the problem. So this metacognition tries to decrease the false notions. And in the adult psychiatry, you might have witnessed it. There are biases. It goes through thought biases. And if we just consider it as a transfer to the AI, indeed, these metacognitive studies in the adult psychiatry, in education and in rehabilitation, as well as in order to increase the adaptation to daily life, it would certainly create a kind of important data. So if we can describe how one thinks, then we can benefit from adaptation to daily life. So the educational consultants as well as educational technologists would think the same way. And this is a poster that was prepared by our students. Do I know what I'm thinking? So, in daily life, this is not something that is asked. The children are not asked about it. So, there are certain expressions that were settled in our language. Where did you recall this thought from? Don't create new things. And now there's a new concept, neurodiversity. So it's neurodiversity, which is nöroçeşitlilik in Turkish, and different thinking brains are to participate in life in different ways. So this requires, of course, personalized training or education. And there's also a concept which is named uh, specific learning to person. For example, a person with dyslexia cannot get education with the other people in the classroom. They need to get education another one. Or another person with disability in learning can be called lazy person, or can be said to be a person who doesn't understand or does not participate in the classroom. However, with educational approaches, this person can form a kind of learning model in the mind, and we can create this atmosphere for that person. So while we think about this, while we say that we should have practices, of course, 100 years ago, this idea was tackled. The only thing I know is that I don't know anything. So to know not to know the thing that we do not know is an important concept, and which is more important than knowing. To know not to know the thing not knowing, and to go for learning is important. And when we say that metacognition or metacognitive questions, this can be diversified. When how I learn an information and knowledge, how and which knowledge I learn, and do I know how to learn it, and why do I know why I learn it? And especially in the recent times, in the elementary, secondary, and high school stages, these are the specific personal learning methods. And I would like to recommend you this article, not directly related to psychiatry, but this is the thinking philosophy. Why it is important? Why it is important? Why is it important to teach children to think? Is there a subject called philosophy now at the high school? So to think about how to learn, it's important to teach children, because critical thinking starts with to understand what we are thinking. So for that reason, I recommend this article. From time to time, the Ministry of National Education carries out certain performance studies, and this research belongs to 2019, and in 81 provinces with 112,000 students. It was researched that 40% of these students do not understand what they read. There is a reading rate, but they are giving the Turkish texts. The things that are explained in an implicit way, they are not understood, and there is the failure of 40% of these students who cannot understand the implicit messages. So it is not that the students have high or low grades from Turkish subject. So when we talk about something related to mental state, mental health, we understand what it means, but when it reaches to the community, to which extent the community understands this text, and more importantly, it's possible to differentiate between the false and true things. When you have a doubt about the content of that text, is really important achievement. And when you are done with the high school, you must have had or you must have gained that competency. It doesn't require that you understand everything in that text. What is the truth rate, or the what is the truth in that, and what you understand from that is important. And now I have to talk about this pandemic. During the pandemic, what is the mental state? What was the mental state of the people? We need to remember that from the perspective of the families and youngsters, these are the most important factors related to anxiety or related to the discontinuation of the education, as well as the distortion of the health quality. Many researches were conducted, and we already experienced these as well. And the children and adolescent mental health, what are the in terms of the circadian rhythm and perception of time, as well as regulatory activities. I would like to focus on the perception of time. There has been important distortion in the perception of time, and because of this disorder uh, in perception of time, it is said that in the HD, it is similar to the perception of or dysregulation, or the perception of time. So, so the cognition of the DHD. So, so do you know what is the word of the year? This was published by Collins. Have you ever heard of it? So while it is said that the pandemic is over, we came across with other things. The A new permanent crisis. So the content of the word here is, in an unexpected way, to have a continuous crisis and not to know in the upcoming stage. It's all about this. We know that the continuous stress affects the attention functions, and also when we look at into the cases of deficiency in attention, a daily stress which is to be perceived as normal is certainly a big thing for them. So the tolerance to all emotional stimulus are less, and uh, critical criticisms thresholds are very low, and they tend to talk about, or they tend to think about general things, and how our response is given during the stress time. In a time of attention deficit, you always assume that there's a stress all the time, and that person is trying to get this in order. So for that reason, I wanted to talk about this pharma crisis. And if we just go towards a bit to psychiatry, non-functional thought, and to have challenge in coping with it, it's a kind of challenge in coping. And in terms of cognitions, people have some biases, and then this may cause a kind of inappropriate response. So if a child says that I if he or she takes exams thinking that I always get the low marks, or she has an thought that her colleagues would not like attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, how these are connected with each other, and what are the negative impacts on life, and what are the executive functions here. Because if you can control your cognitions, and as mentioned by the other professor, if you can increase your adaptive functions, then you can increase your resilience. So there was a good example in the opening speech. It can be an hyperactive case, or it can be a person with diabetes. Then that person doesn't mean that this person is not mentally feeling well. It means that it is how you are tackling with it and how you are adapting to it. In terms of developing the adaptation, it is important to understand this. So in the HD cases, with the frequency of the negative events, we see that the metacognition has been researched, and in March 2018 and March 2019, for the age group of 17-14, the ADHD children were taken into consideration. This was a case study, and emotional indomitableness scale was used. And screening scale was used, and then depression and anxiety in children scale was also used here. And we wanted to use different scales than the ones used previously. And then we had also contributions by the students. So this is the understanding problem. So when you are given that informed that you go for research, and then you make the research, and you get new information, and when you provide education, different people from different fields can come together, and this is important that this is done in this way. And I wanted to give some information, some examples. There are four stages. There are four stages of the scale. So the children also tell us. So children say that to draw things makes me understand the subject better, and when I feel I need it, I can learn by myself. Before I start studying, I think what I have to learn, and including ourselves when we approach the certain subject or learning something or talking about a certain subject, we don't think about how we learn. And when we look into these questions, we see that every one of them is valuable. And for example, personal awareness, individual awareness, and the greatest challenge in the ADHD is not to know, what to understand, what not to understand. What to expect from the examination, math exam, it can be 40 or 85. So it may be 50. So related to monitor or follow how it has been done. There is no idea about it. He may or she may say that he would get 80, but it may be 40, and he may not have an idea about which mistake he or she has done. It may expand into the life as well to repeat this error or mistake within the life over and over again, and this requires an awareness of oneself. So perhaps it may be the case that you have used the emotional indomitableness, and this is formed of sub factors, and these are the rising marks. These are important for us. This is sensitivity, distortion, and recovery or improvement. And we can also give some examples to this. For example, when people do not like me, I feel myself bad. For example, with the pandemic, the from the population, from the young girls, we all always used heard this. If somebody makes me feel bad, I make the same thing to that person. When I have a good morale, bad morale, I can do things that I may hurt others, and there's a social. This is also related to social reciprocity, and these are not the things that we focus on a lot, but emotional indomitableness would be one of the things in future that we will be talking about. If we're talking about permacrisis, then the people with emotional intelligence would be adapting more. So in statistical evaluation, addition to the analysis, we also use the regression models. In terms of sex, gender, there was not much significant difference. And of course, in the boys, in terms of deficiency, attention deficiency, it's more, and there was not much significance in terms of median age. And in terms of the mother, there was not any difference. And in terms of the income, this was published in 2019. I reviewed it, and then it drew my attention the distribution of the income distribution. It is within a high socio-economic class. I thought whether this was written wrong, but within 2 years, this is a great socio-economic differentiation that was created within such a short period of time. So this metacognition awareness score median. So we see that so the score was less, and if we look into the emotionally indomitableness scale in terms of sensitivity and in terms of distortion disorder, we see that the score was higher, but there has been a significant difference. And DSM-4, according to DSM-4, this was what we expected. In terms of the negative life events in the ADHD group, we see that Stanley Kutcher also mentioned about it. We see that they are more prone to have accidents. They are in more risky conditions more, but in this study we didn't see any difference. And in terms of the score median or the average, we see that the ones that I denoted with black, they are the questionnaires related to behaviors. But however, the ones marked with red, especially in terms of the metacognition awareness scale, and also the emotionally indomitableness in terms of the sensitivity, there has been a difference, a significant difference. So in the case group, we see that there is a challenge in these fields, and this in the correlation analysis. When we look into the correlation analysis in the metacognition question, in all both in the cases and control groups, we see that there's a correlation. And once again, in the ADHD group, in negative wise, there has been something So as the metacognition increases, emotional adaptation or emotional resilience scores decrease. So here there's an adverse correlation. So the emotional indomitableness scores decrease as the metacognition competences skills increase. As the person, we see that there is more adaptation of the person, especially in the case group. And here, with the other questionnaires, once again, all metacognition scores, depression, anxiety, and all the scores related to behaviors, they are changing within the negative direction. And of course, there might be other thoughts, the psychopathology, existence of psychopathology, the youngster being able to think healthily, organizing competences are challenged. So this may be related to stigma as well. So just in contrary, are you autistic? Are you spastic? Are you schizophrenic? There are certain expressions in Turkish, as you know. Perhaps more than behaviors, it may be related to how they make their decisions or how they think. This may decrease the stigmatization, and then I underline the neurostigmatization. The ones who think different should be included into the system. This may be an important detail in regression analysis. If you look into the black part, the metacognition scale is predicted and by these certain subscores. And what are these? There's the emotional indomitableness, and we see that the emotional awareness impacts the metacognition scores of that person. And if we'll go into the discussion, what can be our achievements? I forgot to say something. As the weight of the ADHD increases, there is this decrease in the metacognition. So the severity of the disease is important. In the mild cases, there's not much high scores. So if an attention deficit, if there's a depression is accompanied or there's an anxiety accompanied by it, then there would be a different perspective, of course. And most of the time in the clinic, we see that these are accompanied. So we see that there's accompanied by performance anxiety or exam anxiety. So the modulating the perspective of the child may increase the quality of life of that person. So such studies are not available yet, but in the long term, AI, artificial intelligence, or analysis to be done specific to a person, or in the previous presentation we talked about sleep, for example, hyperactive disorder child, the awakeness and metacognition infrastructure and behavior can be calculated and an index can be formed and special risk score can be formed, and this may also impact the treatment. Daniela Lewis did not mention about it. So the person who goes to bed very light, so they have less treatment response. So there might be a kind of definition with these parameters and these social reservations, and it can be dealt from this perspective, having those low scores, so repetitive thoughts, negative self-evaluation, and also restricted self-control are the ones who challenge the situation. So for the hyperactive cases, for attention deficit, can there be a different metacognitive therapy? For example, in the long term, I think that there might be an application made, and accordingly with this application there might be some stimulants to send the patients. Perhaps there may be some applications. There are some psychiatric applications, keeping diary and small reminders, or if that person cannot make an feedback, an application may provide a feedback. So there might be something that plans the person. So I cannot finish this. So actually, uh, they can be more efficient. There might be multitasking instead of going for a minute efficient work. A certain project can be finalized. This can be thought, or this can be considered, and with computer scientists, this may be considered, and a software can give a positive output because it is easy to use and it may be specific and it can be customized or personalized for a person. So let me go through the important points. And of course, we can also follow the follow-up and treatment process as well. And the most important thing is we can control these children in order not to be involved in risky cases, events. As you know, the attention deficit causes these children not to have self-confidence, and this self-confidence, self-control skills are to be increased, and these are important to be done. And thank you very much